Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our final evening of Pub Theology 2026. I see you out there. You know I can see you. Yeah, there we go. Round of applause. There we go. All right. We're glad that you are here tonight here at Vector Brewing. My name is Justin Brooks. I am the Director of Contemporary Music and your MC for tonight. And I want to ask you to help me thank Vector, our hosts, for these past 4 weeks. Thank you, guys. You guys have been amazing. Please, this whole entire time, no matter what, please feel free to help yourself to the buffet and to their award-winning beer and wine there. And please, let's just show our generosity to them. I'd like to thank Leah and Chan on the sound back there. Thank you guys so much. And if it's your first time with us tonight, Pub Theology was conceived as a way for us to explore questions that might be a little deeper in nature with our friends. And so also, a friend of yours might not darken the door of a church, but they might come with you to a pub to hear a theological discussion. And so that was the whole point of this whole thing. And we are St. Michael and all angels who put this on. We are an Episcopal church over in the Park Cities area, right down Northwest Highway. We have traditional and contemporary services. Anything you're looking for, you can probably find it there at St. Michael. So we invite you to join us. stmichael.org is our website. Our format tonight is we are going to have about a 30 to 45-minute talk from our speaker. And during that time, feel free to refill your drinks and do what you need to do. We're going to have about a 15-minute break after that. And then after that break, we're going to have about 20 minutes of question and answer time. So on your tables, you will find two things. Number one, there is a QR code. If you scan that QR code, that will take you to our survey. We are always trying to find ways to make Pub Theology the very best it can be, and you guys help us do that. We've done things from reorient the room to not face the sun, to offering gluten-free options with our pizza here. And so we do listen to what you tell us. And so please fill out that survey. And if you do fill out that survey, that enters you into a drawing for this $50 gift card to Vector Brewing. So we will do a raffle right after that 15-minute break. So go ahead and fill out your survey, and that will enter you in for that $50 gift card. Also on your table, there are the question and answer slips, and there should be some pins on your table. After the talk, during that 15-minute break, will be a great time for you to write down those questions. We're going to have members of our Pub Theology volunteer team to come around and collect those questions in a basket. And so just drop those in, and we will bring those up to our speaker, and they will field those, and we'll have that 20 minutes of Q&A after that. Now, I would like to introduce our topic and tonight's speaker. Again, I'm supposed to say usually that the views of the speaker are not necessarily that of St. Michael's, but we have a clergy person from St. Michael here tonight, so their views are, we'll let you figure that out. Tonight's topic, you are not your brain, neuroscience, addiction, and identity. How do we understand the relationship between brain chemistry and the soul? Where's God's grace in the struggle for healing and wholeness? How can faith communities respond with compassion and hope? Tonight we're going to explore that intersection of neuroscience, addiction, and identity, offering a message grounded in grace, resilience, and the truth that we are more than the sum of our biology. Our speaker tonight is the Reverend Robin Hinkle, and she is our associate for Pastoral Care at St. Michael and All Angels. Robin is she joined the clergy team in 2022, and prior to moving to Dallas, she was the rector at St. Mary's Episcopal Church in Jasper, Alabama, where she was called in 2017. And under her leadership, St. Mary's hosted what became the largest food bank in Walter County. During her early days at St. Mary's, Walker County was declared to be the epicenter of opioid epidemic in the entire United States, and she was therefore asked to join forces with the head of Rural Health System and the head of Walker County Community Foundation to address this epidemic. And they did that by formally putting together a coalition of forces, and that represented healthcare, education, and the justice system and social services. Prior to her call in ministry, Robin practiced law for 15 years as a commercial litigator. She left that practice of law and found a company that advocated for long-term treatment for the disease of addiction, opening a clinic in Boise, Idaho. She has served on the Drug Court Task Force for the state of Alabama and testified before the Alabama Certificate of Need Board regarding the need for better treatment better treatment options in the state. She attended seminary at the University of the South at Sewanee and graduated in 2015. She served her first 2 years of ordained ministry as associate rector of the Church of the Holy Apostles in Hoover. She's married to Scott Hinkle, and her daughter Sadie works for Lockheed Martin and lives in Dallas. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Robin Hinkle.
I am so excited to be talking to you all about this particular topic of brain science and addiction. I just want you to know from the outset that this is you can tell from what he just talked about, from my background, that this is a place of my heart. And it is a huge passion of mine because I come from a family where addiction has touched us. Okay. And it has touched my extended family. And through that, and through helping people get into recovery, is how I learned a lot about the brain, about how addiction works, about treatment, what's good treatment, what's not so good treatment. And so since that time, I have become an advocate, not only, you heard all the like at the state level and things like that, but also with individual families. I've been working with families for decades as they tried to just sort of find their way through. So this is my family-to-family talk to you all today. I hope that you will walk away with a good understanding of how addiction, particularly particularly alcoholism, works, and there are things, how it runs in families and how it impacts us, and how grace is so necessary for all involved. So let's get started. I'm running two screens because I've got some notes here. All right, so let's go back. Okay. All right. I love Nancy Reagan. She had a passion for this too, okay? And back in the day, this was back in the 70s in the 70s. She came up with, she had a passion for people who were dealing with addiction and alcoholism, particularly alcoholism. And so she came up with this campaign called the Just Say No campaign. And it seemed like a good idea at the time. Now, back in that time, the medical community did not know that much about alcoholism or addiction. Certainly, the leaders of our country didn't know anything about it. The people who run the insurance company and started the insurance thing, they didn't know anything about the disease of addiction. And so this Just Say No campaign, that's what it made sense. Why can't our people just say no? Just say no, don't take another drink. Or just say no, don't take another drug. Why don't they just stop, essentially, is what they were saying. Why don't they just use their brain, this frontal part of their brain, and think their way through it, and understand the consequences, and then rationally make a decision not to drink or use drugs if they have a problem. And everybody in the country thought that was a great idea, and that's really how the medical community, everybody thought about the disease of addiction, and particularly alcoholism. They thought it was this part of your brain. And then came along PET scans and MRIs. Okay? And that's where we're going to start getting a little bit. I want to show you, first of all, you need to know the basic parts of your brain. Okay? And that's what this is. You've got the front lobe here, the frontal lobe, and that's where your judgment, your rational thinking is going on right here. So that's the part that people thought. This is where, if you use that part of your brain, you'll stop using drugs, you'll stop drinking if you can't handle it. And then you've got these other parts. You've got your movement part, your vision, your memory. And then in the middle, the midbrain's that's where your amygdala is, and that's your reward system. And it's an involuntary part of your brain. So if you get frightened, it's your fight or flight. If you get frightened, lots of stuff goes off in your brain automatically without you even thinking about it. And your body and your brain is going to respond in a certain way. It also controls your food. If you don't eat, this part of your brain goes, you better eat something or you're going to die. And it's not voluntary. Your body's just going to keep saying, I need food to survive. There's all sorts of things that go on. It's also the reward system of the brain. Because the brain is smart. And the brain is like, oh, well, if I tell my person that, oh, that's good, then they'll keep doing that particular thing. And if I tell this person that that's going to scare them, then they'll stop. Okay, so it was a survival mechanism. It's that midbrain part. When they started doing the PET scans and the MRIs and the functional MRIs, they thought that this part of the brain was going to light up when somebody was using alcohol or drugs. They were surprised, and then shocked, and then befuddled. Well, this is a real problem, because it was the reward system that lit up in those scans. This right here, your brain is made up of neurotransmitters, and this is the reward system part of your brain. And basically what happens is when something happens, so let's just say I eat a piece of chocolate, okay? And say I love chocolate and it gives me a happiness. I'm actually going to change it to ice cream because I'm not a big chocolate person, but boy, you give me some praline pecan ice cream, I'm going to light up, okay? So what happens is I'll eat that, and the reward part of my brain's going to go, that's pretty good. And so it's going to say, okay, that's good. And I'm going to have neurotransmitters that go from one to another. And you see that space there? That's called a synapse, okay? And so dopamine is going to go through there. That's what makes me feel good. That's that rush. That's that happiness chemical in our brain. And it's going to fill up with a little dopamine, and then it's going to go down into the receptor, and then it's going to be recycled. That's what this shows. So you see the little triangles on the left, the transmitting neurons. Those are like little train cars. Okay, so they're going to take that little dopamine and they're going to dump it into that synapse, and then it's going to go to the receptor, and the receptor is going to take it, and it's going to go, yay, this is great. I like whatever's happening right now. This is great, and all of this is involuntary and instantaneous. And so the problem is when we introduce some certain substances into our brain, our synapses are affected in our reward system. So you see how the little triangles, they go back in and they get in a little line and they go back and they've recycled, and so they're making, on the left-hand side, they're making a train track. When you use drugs, it messes up that system. The transporters are blocked by the drug or by the alcohol or by whatever it is that's going on right there. And so that leaves those transmitters just sort of sitting in there, or the transporters sitting in there. The other thing that happens is certain drugs are going to really increase that rush. They're going to increase that dopamine release. So, for instance, methamphetamine. If you were to introduce that into your system, your neurotransmitters are going to fire. There's going to be a huge dopamine release. It's going to fill up that space, and it's going to take a while for it to sort of calm itself down. Okay? And all of this is happening in that whole reward system of the brain. And we know that because of our scans. Now, these are the initial scans that were taken these were some of the initial ones back in the 90s that got people's attention. All right? So this is a person who ingested cocaine. All right? What the first scan shows is the brain activity immediately prior and during as it's ingested. It took 3 or 4 minutes for it to hit the brain, the reward center, and look how it lights up that reward center, okay? That's that midbrain point. This is how they figured out what was going on, okay? And then after 20 to 30 minutes, so you know, so with cocaine, you go really high, and then you go really low. And that's that 20 to 30 minute scan. Look at the lack of activity in the brain. And it's not just for cocaine or hard drugs. On the left side is a normal brain with the reward center. And you see those red colors? You want red. Okay, that means good activities going on in that midbrain. These other scans, the one to the right is very interesting, particularly now with the research that's going on with GLP-1s, that there may be some use for them and better research for how they can be used to treat addiction. Because that's the center that GLP-1s are hitting. They're hitting that same area. But look at the cocaine user on the left. Look at the lack of activity in the whole brain, and also in particular in the midbrain. And then there's the brain of an alcoholic. Again, look at the brain lack of activity and how it's gotten smaller with the good high dopamine. What happens is as you use, you are changing your brain physiology. You're affecting the way that your brain works. And every time you use, especially, or every time, if you have a brain that's addicted, every time you use, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Your brain's going to have more and more problems. This is just the same. These are newer scans, but it's the same with heroin. It's the same with meth. It's just the same with alcohol and cocaine. Okay. So when people, if you have, I'm going to call it an alcoholic brain, okay? Your brain functions, if you've crossed the line and you're in addiction and you've got substance use disorder, when you initially drank, so when you initially started drinking, or you would get this good rush, and then you would maybe crave another drink, and it was just this good high feeling. It was a lot of fun. And so that's great dopamine going off. But every time you keep doing more and more, especially if you increase the amount that you're using, increase the amount of alcohol that you're using, eventually you get to a point where you're just drinking to feel 75% normal. Normal is that line. Those people that are below the line never get to a place of happiness. Their dopamine is just so restricted. They're living in the world of cortisol, which is stress, adrenaline, stress, and endorphin. This is why people who are in active alcoholism or active addiction, all of them are depressed. They all have a depressed brain. And they exhibit all the signs of depression. Okay. So here's some more. I just really want you all to understand the physiology of the brain just completely changes when you're in active addiction. So here's an alcoholic. The darker coloring indicates depressed brain activity. And this person's probably very, very far along in their journey of alcoholism, compared to the normal healthy levels. And then you also can see it in the scans, the size of the brain, the amount of gray matter that's there, you can see it, and that's what's showing here. There's a normal 43-year-old brain, that's an alcoholic 43-year-old brain. Okay, so this is probably after 30 years of drinking. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so not only does it hijack your brain and it changes your brain and it changes the way that your brain works, it even if you're not using, there's triggers that will light up that whole system and get you craving again. Okay, so this is what this is showing. So remember, the amygdala, that's your reward system. So they had somebody who is in recovery for cocaine. And they showed him or her a picture of a video of nature. And the amygdala didn't light up at all. They showed them a cocaine video, and it lit right back up, even if they were in cocaine. That's why it's so hard, because there's things called triggers. And there are triggers that will put, when you're suffering from substance use disorder, the triggers will light up your amygdala and have you craving more and trying to you're back in survival mode. Because remember, this is your survival mode of your brain. And so your brain is acting as if I don't have that now, I will die. This is not a function of, oh, if I go and take that drink, then my wife is going to be mad at me, and because I'm supposed to be in recovery. That's not happening. That part of the brain is not firing. The middle brain is firing, and it's a survival craving. Okay? So, that's the bad news. Now we're going to go on into the good news, okay? We also know through brain scans that recovery is possible. All right, so I want you to look here. See that normal control? The second is this person who is a meth abuser. Now, meth is nasty. We'll talk about it a little bit more. That's 1 month post-detox. Very sick brain. Okay. 14 months detox, finally getting back to where they were. 14 months. A 14-day to 21-day program does not solve that. Okay? More about that in a minute. So, happens also in cocaine. There's a normal brain up on top. There's cocaine abusers. That's 10 days. That's right after detox. Very low activity, very sick brain. And then there's the cocaine abuser after 100 days clean. Still a lot of ways to go. 100 days. Okay. So so are certain people's brains set up for this? Absolutely, yes. Okay? If you have somebody in your family who's first degree around you, brother, sister, mother, whatever, you are 40 to 60%, 40 to 60% of having alcohol use disorder risk. So, but it's worse for your kids. If a child grows up in the environment where alcohol use disorder is present, they are 4 times more likely than a child who doesn't to develop a substance use disorder. Part of it is genetic, part of it is environmental. And that shows up as we're raising our children. And I want to spend a little time on children. Okay, so our brains continue to develop. I know you all know this. They actually continue to develop all the way up till around 24. To your 24 is when you're fully developed. With males, it may actually be as late as 27. This is why they're great warriors. Okay, because this part of their brain is the last part. This judgment part is the last part to be developed. And so they will go into war, and they'll go, yeah, let's go do it. But meanwhile, the rest of us that are a little older going, let's think about this. But that's that part of the brain. The bad news is the middle brain, the midbrain is also, it takes a long time for it to finally get fully developed. So if you start drinking early on, like 12 or 13 years old, you are going to, you've heard of arrested development? Well, you're arresting the development, the actual physiological development of your brain. Okay? And so age of first use and then regular use is very important. Of those who abuse or are dependent on alcohol, the age of first use, those who are 14 or younger, they have that high 15% chance of becoming having a problem as an adult. If you wait till you're 21 or older to start regular drinking, look at that. That's 2.7%. You see the difference in how brain development makes a huge difference as to whether you'll have a problem with alcohol as an adult. Same with illicit drug use. Usually begins in teenage years. That 12 to 13-year-olds, we got to watch our middle schoolers. This is not a topic I would teach this to middle schoolers way before I taught anybody in high school. High school's not going to listen to you. Actually, they do now. But back in the day, high school didn't listen to you. Middle schoolers, they need to because they're the ones that are at real risk. Okay? So that 12 to 13 to 14 to 15 year age, they're the ones who are more likely to develop a problem over time because they started so early. This is for drugs, but it also is for alcohol. Okay? But if they hold off until they're 26 or older, look at that. It just plummets down. Okay? Now, here's some good news. The percent of high schoolers who have used drugs or alcohol over, I think this is the one, let me look at this one. Yeah. This is over the past year. So they do these surveys. And so as you can see, back in the 90s when binge drinking and all of that was going on, all the way up until early 2000, look how high it was of the high schoolers who were using drugs or alcohol, had used drugs or alcohol over the last year. 70+% had. And these were the regular users. But it has plummeted since then. The reason is education. Okay, we have started educating our kids on this, and you all remember the story about Natalie Holloway? She was from Birmingham, Alabama. Okay, she disappeared while I lived there. And the school that she was at, when they did the Pride survey and they figured out how many people in that school were drinking or using drugs, 95% of her class had used alcohol or drugs in the last month, either day, week, or month. That was way above the national average. The national average was about 64 for high school seniors. They had a culture of alcoholism and addiction. When she disappeared, well, then that community that was very well resourced, just like our community, they got on fire. And they started to look at all of this that I'm showing you, because it really hadn't been out. Lots of people have never seen this, and you can imagine how small a percentage back in 2005 had ever heard any of this. So they started with these education programs, and they started educating our kids. And they knew this would work because of tobacco. In the 1960s, about 75% of the people in the country were regularly using cigarettes or tobacco. And so if you went up to a kid in the 1999 or in 2000 and said, "Why don't you smoke?" Little kids even would look at you and go, "Well, that's bad for you." Okay? They took that sort of knowledge and they started doing it in schools. That coalition that we talked about, that was in my bio, the very first thing we did was we put counselors and educators in the schools in that county to talk about opioids and all of the epidemic issues that were hitting that particular county. educating the next generation as to the problems that, that all of this causes made a big impact. And so if they wait until they're 21 years old, that's why we're having lower incidence of this. So this is the 12-month prevalence in 8th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So if you look at the top one, that's 12th grade. It used to be way up there at 85%. It's now down to around 40, I think. And then look at the 8th graders. That's that bottom line. Those smart kids, look at them. It's almost down to 10%. They understand, they're listening, and they're understanding this, which gives me great hope. This is just another way of showing it. In 25, basically, it's down 21% for 12th graders, 32% for 10th graders, 26% for 8th graders. Okay. And then this is just another way of showing it. 8th grade students who reported binge drinking. Binge drinking is gone in 8th grade. That is such a good thing because their brains were just getting completely hijacked at that early age, and they were flighting into all sorts of other stuff. So it's down to, that message has gotten out about binge drinking. Middle school issues. I love my middle schoolers, love them. Because, I mean, they're so much fun, they've got so much energy, they've got a little curiosity, but they have no frontal lobe. They have a hard time, they're not rational thinkers. We think they are, they look like they should be, they look like they're almost big people. So some of them are, but they do the silliest stuff. They do like the huffing and the sniffing and the bagging, like putting spray paint in and, oh, it's bad. They do all this, they do huffing. The other thing, and I know they do them here in Dallas, they're called pill parties. Okay, grandparents, parents, pay attention to what's in your medicine cabinet when your middle schoolers come around, particularly the boys, not the girls. When they come around, they will come and grab anything they can out of your medicine cabinet, and then they all get together and they get a big bowl, and then they throw it in the bowl and they'll roll a dice. And then they'll pull out how many pills out of that bowl that dice has. And then they take them. And they could be taking your blood pressure medicine. They could be taking your, I don't know, Ambien. They could be taking whatever it is that's in your medicine cabinet. You gotta pay attention. Okay, just a little. All right, here's another thing. I want you to educate your kids and your middle school kids on. All right, so like I said, they're great, but spatially they don't really think about things. They don't understand. They didn't understand this. They think that if you drink, I think they're getting better at it, but they think that a little shot of vodka, they just think like that. See that beer on the right? You just fill that up with vodka. It's the same as having a beer. They really do think this. You're like, oh, no, they can't think that. I'm like, have you been around a middle schooler lately? Yeah, no, the same thing. And so when I'm teaching middle schoolers, I'm like, okay, I want to teach you something about this. Because, I mean, somebody's got to tell them. Otherwise, they're going to find out the wrong way. Also, did y'all know this? This is very interesting to me. Did you know that the solo cup is marked so that you can for your drinks? Did y'all know that? I thought it's like, I love to share this. So your beer, you're supposed to drink maybe that 1 12-ounce beer, that's that. Wine is that little one, and then liquor goes on the bottom, okay? So just so you know, I've always thought that was very good. And it's important, okay? Because, all right, we're gonna talk about men first. What this does is it's all blood alcohol level, and what happens on your coordination and all your impairment and all that sort of stuff is completely and directly related to how much you weigh and how many drinks you consume, okay? So if you're just a little guy and you have 2 drinks, you're going to be at 0.07, just like that, okay? But if you're 240 pounds, you can drink 2 drinks, and you're only at 0.03. Now, when this gets scary is when you have a little young woman who's drinking with a big guy, okay? They need to understand that they don't need to try to keep up with that guy. I know. This is what happens. I'd like my people to know this early. I want them to understand this as middle schoolers and high schoolers so that when they get to college, this doesn't come to bite them, okay? So that's men. Here's women. We metabolize it differently. We actually can become an alcoholic more quickly because of the way that our bodies function, okay? And also later in life, so that whole after 21, that's based on an average. Women will skew the average. Now, there's less alcoholic women than men. It's a smaller percentage. But even if you're like 27 years old, you're still at a higher risk than a fellow who's at 27. It has to do with the way that our bodies metabolize alcohol and drugs. So, but here's the thing that a 100-pound young woman who drinks 2 drinks is over the legal limit, 0.09. And that you can just see, if you have little people in your family, you can see what happens, okay? They need to know this. So I teach that whenever I teach this class. Substance use disorder, you hear me say that, includes everything from marijuana, meth, prescription drugs. Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how many people I've talked to. Well, my doctor prescribed me the opioids, so, I don't think I have a problem because he wouldn't give it to me. I'm like, well, you're, believe me. And then they tell me how many they're taking, and I'm like, okay. Yes, that is a problem. It's a big deal. Or people who take other people's prescriptions. But prescription drugs, that's the opioid epidemic that you heard about. Do you know that county that I was in, that was declared the epicenter for the opioid epidemic in the U.S., actually technically would make it the whole world, but the center of the whole epidemic. 2.1 million prescriptions in 1 year to a county of 64,000 people. Those prescriptions were bunkus. But people thought, well, I got them. You hear about these people who were athletes who got injured, and not only were the prescriptions being written, a lot of them, but the amount prescribed was so high. They were prescribing stronger amounts over long periods of time. And that's what caused a big part of the opioid epidemic. And that was just the Medicaid prescriptions. That doesn't even count the people that had Blue Cross Blue Shield and were getting them filled. We're also talking about cocaine, heroin, that's spelled wrong, ecstasy, steroids, and inhalants. Okay. All right, meth. I hate meth. Okay, meth. Not even once. Did y'all ever see that campaign? See this woman here? Less than 2 years, she went from the upper left-hand corner to the bottom right-hand corner. There was these campaigns. There was one in Idaho. They were in different places in the country, but it said not even once. Meth was designed by people who are in Mexico, who are scientists, who are designing drugs to get you addicted as quickly as they can. And they're still working on stuff now. Here's what happens with meth. You see that food? Remember I told you, loving my pralines ice cream? That'll give me a 50% increase in my dopamine level in my head, generally. Sex is 100%. Cocaine, it'll increase your dopamine levels 350%. Meth was designed to increase the dopamine level in your head, in your body, for the first use, 1,200%. You would take meth the first time and a lot of people became immediately addicted. You would take that meth and it would take days for that initial rush to go away. And what happens is when your brain's been hijacked by these drugs, or when your brain physiology has changed, you start craving these, and there's not much, it's very hard you want more and more and more and more and more. It could be meth, it could be alcohol, it could be whatever your drug of choice is. And remember that chart I had where it goes up and then it goes down, where you're feeling normal here, but then you're not? Well, every time you use, your rush is just a little bit less, and then it's a little bit less, and then it's a little bit less, and then it's a lot less. And then you're just struggling to survive, and you're trying to find it wherever you can just to survive. Okay. Meth was designed to do that. Fentanyl is now being designed to do that. Okay. That's why these are so dangerous. So, why kids use alcohol or drugs? Biological predisposition, we talked about that. We definitely have the genetics in our family. Peer pressure. Parental attitudes. You see this a lot. Unfortunately, there are families that'll get their little kids involved on it just to get them quieted down. So they're drug users themselves, and they're like going, okay, this baby will not shut up, so they'll give the baby something. Okay, so parental attitudes. It can also be parental attitudes towards alcohol. They're going to mimic what you do. You know that as parents, you are the single most you are the greatest influence on your kids as what they do as they grow up and how they turn out. And it absolutely shows up in alcohol and drug use. Cultural factors. So like I said, that school in Mountain Brook, this culture in that school was all about drugs and alcohol, and it was not a safe use or wise use of how they went about it. Life crisis. This is both for the family and for the child. If they lose a parent, if they're abused, if they're bullied, there's all sorts of trauma that they'll turn and they will turn and use drugs or alcohol to allay their just misery. Depression. I want to talk a little bit about co-occurring disorders. So people who are ADHD and people who are bipolar or who have clinical depression, all sorts of different types of brain chemistry issues, they're set up to alleviate that with alcohol or drugs. Their brains are they're used to, their chemistry is off, and drugs and alcohol can make them feel more normal. And so if they start using early and they start using a lot of people use that. It's self-medicating, basically, is what they're doing. So not everybody who has not everybody who is an alcoholic has a co-occurring disorder of depression, but they all feel depressed. But once the alcohol is lifted, or once the drug is lifted, and their brain chemistry goes back, you're able to just see who's bipolar and who's just has the substance use depression that lifts when you're not using. Boredom, that's another one. And then fun and available. Okay, so kids at highest risk, of course, they begin using alcohol or drugs before age 15. They have a parent who has a problem. They have close friends who use. They've been aggressive, antisocial, or hard to control. That may indicate all sorts of different issues in the brain or just in general. They've had trauma. They have behavioral problems. They have parents who don't support them or who are inconsistent. And then they have experienced ongoing hostility or rejection, like actual abuse. Yep. Hey, go away. I've got something on my computer here that's not supposed to be here. There it goes. Okay, so the path of drug dependency. Experimental use, we all know this. More regular use. Daily preoccupation and dependency. As you begin to use more and more, if you have a problem, your tolerance level is going to increase. Okay, so you're going to try to use more and more of something to get that same rush that you had before. Same goes for alcohol. One of my friends that I helped get into treatment in Alabama, she and I sat down, we were having lunch, and we were talking about all of this, and she said, well, Robin, I mean, we're just older, we're heavier, we just need, I need, drinking 2 bottles of wine isn't a big deal. I was like, oh, my friend, I can still only drink 2 glasses of wine and get really sleepy. Okay, so what all that is, some of us metabolize wine or alcohol differently than others. All right, then this is something that you'll start to see as you're moving from 2 to 3 to 4. Okay, I'm not set up to, like, if I drink wine, I have a couple. After 2 or 3, I'm really asleep. Do y'all know people like, so people that I love, they can drink and drink and drink and drink. They drink one, and then that leads to the next one, and then drink. And so it takes me about maybe an hour and a half maybe to metabolize alcohol. The ones that I love, it can take 4 hours. Okay, it's a slower system. So what does that mean? That means that they'll drink and drink and drink and drink, but their body, it hasn't caught up with them yet. And then all of a sudden, 4 hours later, after 12 drinks, not beers, but the big ones, they are sloshed. Okay? That's an indication that you've moved into dependency. All right. Okay, and once you do that, this is Sadie's favorite slide. Once a cucumber becomes a pickle, it's always a pickle. Once you've crossed that line into addiction, you cannot go back. And not only that, you are now going to be subject to cross addiction of everything. So if your drug of choice before was alcohol, and then you're clean for 10, 20 years and you try Coke, you are going to be zapped. You're going to go right back into your addiction very quickly, where you left off 10 years before, and it has kind of kept progressing all along. And you will be very quickly addicted to the new. You've just switched addictions. Okay, once a cucumber becomes a pickle, it's always a pickle. That's why you cannot, that's why there has to be abstinence. You can't drink. Once you're in substance use disorder and your brain's completely hijacked, you can't take a drink, or it's going to set you all back off again. There's permanent damage. And this, of course, affects your mental health. Your depression, suicide risk, cognitive impairment, eventually paranoia. It's all the stress, not only yours, but in the family. Aggression, not only yours, but also in the family. There's sleep disruption, mood swings, and anxiety. All of this. You can see why it's called a family disease. Now, I really want to quickly go over treatment. You can see by what I was showing you earlier, the reason I got so involved in this is because of treatment. Those detox programs for 7 to 10 days, if you don't follow it up with at least 90 days of some sort of good residential treatment, and then follow that up with a good 6 months of outpatient treatment, you have to get over a year. Remember that brain that didn't look any good until about 14 months? That's how long it takes to get your brain to get into a space where you're in decent recovery, where you're starting to feel normal, where your dopamine system starts working again and you get little flicks of red. It takes that long. Why I got so involved in this is because the insurance companies would only cover 14 to 21 days of treatment. So people would go into treatment, they would get dried out, but that didn't even begin to solve the problem. And so people would come out of treatment, and they tried, and they'd cycle through 7 times or whatever, and then they'd commit suicide. Scott and I know about 36 people who've committed suicide because they failed at treatment, and they came out, and they immediately relapsed, and it was just awful. So we got involved because we knew people, if you were homeless, you could go get long-term treatment. We knew it could work with them. If you were very wealthy or just had enough money to pay $40,000 to $60,000 like we did, you could get your people into good treatment, good long-term treatment. It was the middle class that was not getting the good treatment. And so that's why I left law, was to advocate for better treatment, to advocate for mental health parity, so that it would stack up. Once you're in treatment, once you've gone through recovery, all of this is such a time of healing, not only for the person who is suffering from addiction, but also for the families around them. What I want to emphasize is that this is a thing of grace, and that spiritual recovery is a key to good recovery. I don't think the slide was in there, but do you know, like, just being involved in church and having that aspect of it is so important, because guess what? People get mad at each other over years. I was a pretty angry person when I was dealing with an active alcoholic or addict in my family, and I had to get past that anger, and I did it by working the 12 steps of Al-Anon. And my people who are in good, strong recovery did it by working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, this was started back before they knew all about the midbrain thing, but boy, they got it. They nailed it spiritually. Nailed it. Bill Wilson, who was the founder of AA, had a spiritual mentor. His name was Dr. Sam Shoemaker, the Reverend Dr. Sam Shoemaker, the Episcopal rector at Calvary Church in New York City. And he was brilliant, and he is the one that greatly influenced the way that the 12 steps work. Basically, you admit that you have a problem and that it is greater than anything you can do, and you need a power higher than yourself to help you. That's God. So you admit it, and then you ask God to help you. Big part of it is, we were powerless, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, and made a decision to turn our lives over to the care of God. Okay, well, when you do that, you have to make a searching and fearless inventory of ourselves. Sounds like confession. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs? Yes. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Thank God for grace. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure themselves or others. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for his knowledge of his will, for us and the power to carry that out. And then, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and our Al-Anon families, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. The greatest time of spiritual growth that I had early in my life was because of through the Al-Anon program. I was an active member of it. I went to it all the time. I can out myself. And it was these 12 steps, and this is, to me, a spiritual Christian way. It's a discipleship way of living. And so, with that, I'm going to close and ask you all if you have any questions. Boy, these are some really good questions. I appreciate it. Y'all been paying attention. No, this is good. The first thing, I want to go, because this computer's about to die. Somebody asked me what are some protective factors. I skipped over this slide in the presentation. I want to go back to it. There are protective factors that we can put in place to help our kids, give our kids a better chance at not going into substance use disorder. First, parents set clear rules. Set your boundaries. You guys, really, you're the parents. It's okay. You don't have to be friends. You can be friends like when they get older. All right? Maybe like in their 20s or sometime. But not when they're little. Not when they're little. You set the rules and make them clear. Parents, talk about the dangers of drugs. Absolutely. Talk about it. These are smart kiddos. They will listen to what you say. Church attendance, that's one of them. Absolutely. If you attend church or synagogue, it is the correlation, like 20% of the kids that don't attend, it's like this. These kids here that attend church, there's so much a higher rate of not falling into abuse compared to people who don't. Same with sports and being very active in school. Know who people's friends are. Get their phones and look at it and know how to do it. Okay? Or better yet, I love this, the new rules, no phones until you're 16, unless it's just a little hello, okay? So, protective factors, those are good. Okay, so I had a lot of people, is gambling, video games, sex, all sorts of things, food. Yes. Are they all addictions in this same part of the brain center? Yes. All of these, you can be set up, or your brain can change, depending on how you use or abuse whatever it is that's going on, can set you up for a dopamine-related addiction. Okay. Now, not everything is. It's not always going to be, but there are people that are set up. Gambling addiction is a real thing. Sex addiction is a real thing. Think about it. It's the dopamine. It's the dopamine effect. Okay, so you can get addicted. Oh, also vaping. Ooh, I forgot. Vaping. That's yes. Actually, you are more likely to get addicted to vaping than you are to cigarettes, because the amount of nicotine that is being rushed into your brain is like a whole lot higher, maybe 3 times as much higher. And then if you're using marijuana through a vaping, absolutely, it's going to lead into addiction. Okay? Already answered that one. If brain chemistry is a problem, why do people on antidepressants stay depressed? Are they missing the spiritual aspect? Which also relates to this other one. We see the same effects or consequences, or do we see the same effects or consequences for prescription drugs for ADHD and bipolar? Okay. Brain chemistry does cause depression. It causes bipolar. It causes schizophrenia. It causes all sorts of things. There is brain chemistry things going on. Keep taking your meds. Okay? Those medications are helping to alleviate that situation. However, you also need to put around it good habits that will also help to alleviate depression, or that will keep you on your meds. Okay? It's not a pill is going to be the magic solution for what's going on with you. If you've got consequences of what's going on because of what's going on with your brain chemistry, keep taking your medications, and that's going to be part of your recovery. There will be people in recovery who have co-occurring disorders who are going to be on some of these medications. What is the best way to support somebody struggling with addiction, someone in recovery, or what can you do for a friend? I believe a lot in soft intervention. So let's start with somebody who's in active addiction. I do soft interventions all the time. I did one last week, okay? People who are struggling with mental illness or struggling with substance use disorder, alcoholism. I talk to them, we just sit down. It's not a big deal. It's not like the stuff they had on TV where you get the whole group, okay? It's more of just a gentle conversation. Start the conversation, plant the seed. Now, generally, I have a lot more success with people that are in their 30s and their 40s than you ever will have with people in their 20s. But sometimes the teenagers are pretty helpful too. They know that something's wrong. We have people in our high schools who are addicted to all sorts of things. Now, the way that you can do it, the best thing you can do is support long-term treatment. The whole drop-off, particularly with the youth, that's going to take them probably 2 years to get back to normal. Don't think that you're going to send a 17-year-old who's got addiction problems from high school off to college and then things will get better. No way. The best thing you can do is give that child a 2-year gap period, let them go get into strong treatment, go do some great young adult programs, and then go to college, and then decide where they're going to be. That's so the soft intervention to get people into long-term treatment. Now, what I do is I try to get people to get into, they'll say, well, Robin, I don't know, they're not going to commit for 2 years, or they're not going to commit for 1.5 years. I'll go, well, would you go in for 30 days? Will you try this for 30 days? And then, and talk to them about how important it is for 90 days. And then just see what they say. And I guarantee you, if you don't have a problem, they're not going to keep you. Okay? Now, I know they have a problem, but they have to come to the knowledge that they have a problem. And you have about 24 to 48 hours once somebody says that they'll go into treatment and they'll agree, and they may be agreeing for all the wrong reasons. Doesn't matter. That's the time to really act. Don't wait. If you wait a week to find them a place, they'll have changed their mind. And you're going to it's what I call them is opportunity for reset. Another opportunity for reset, if they go into the hospital, that's an opportunity for a reset. If they go to jail, that's an opportunity for a reset. That's why I love our drug courts. Do you know that if somebody goes to treatment because they went through a drug court, they are 65% more likely to go into recovery than somebody who doesn't? It's because the courts are watching, and they're drug testing you, and they're making people accountable. One of the things I did, when I first got out of law, I got a call from I was friends with the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. And she knew I was opening a clinic in Boise, Idaho. And she said, why aren't you doing anything here in Alabama? And I told her because of certificate of need, whatever. She said, Robin, I've got to have treatment in every county. I want a drug court in every single county. And that's when I went on the drug court task force. That's when I testified before the CON board. And that's what we did. We put drug courts. They work if the judge does it well. And if the prosecutor does it well. And if there's all sorts of diversion programs, but they can work. I've seen them work well. Also, when somebody comes out of treatment, oh my gosh, like the transition time from the 90 days, after 90 days, for that next 6 months, it is so important. It's the most important transition that you will have. That's when you really need them to not go back to the apartment with all the other people that we're using. They need to go into sober living environment. Youth they need to go to sober living. There's all sorts of ways to go into places where they're surrounded by people, where they continue to go to. They start going to AA groups all the time, or every night. They're required to in order to live there. They'll make them work. They start getting into a routine. And that's what's going to help them build day after day of recovery. So helping people to get into that transition stage and stay there is so important. And then not bringing up as a spouse or as a person in the family who just don't try to solve all your problems at once. All that mess that's in your family, financial, tax, just meanness, the ugliness, all the way that people acted. Don't try to solve all that 90 days out of treatment, 6 months out of treatment. Take your time. You got years. That's what you're doing. You're looking for a long-term solution. That's when you got to rely on God. And what I tell people is, if so the difference between the AA side or the NA side, Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous, those are the people who are struggling with the actual addiction. Their family members are called the Al-Anon members, okay? The way the program really works for long-term strong recovery is that each person stays in their own hula hoop. I had to learn this. I had to learn I can't be trying to solve all that my loved one's problems. He's got to figure that out himself. That's his hula hoop. It is not my hula hoop. I had to stay in my hula hoop. And the other thing I learned was if I was being the best person that God called me to be and just focus on, God, what do you want me to do? And the things that I have to do and the people that I've hurt, including that one over there that I'm so mad at, I had to learn how to get rid of that resentment, how to not be angry, and how to really love unconditionally and to stay committed. That was my work. And that, believe me, that's that time of spiritual growth. I needed God to help me through that, just as much as the alcoholics and the addicts need to forgive themselves for the shame and all of the things that they have done because as a result of their addiction. When both of us are living as a child of God, looking to God as to who he wants us to be and how he wants us to live, it's phenomenal. That's a beautiful life. And it is true reconciliation and true, strong, spiritually based recovery. What controls on prescribed amounts are on the prescribed amounts that physicians can prescribe? Used to be none. It's gotten a little better, not much better. You really depend on the doctor to do what's right, okay? There are some controls. I'm not one to really talk about all that regulation, but doctors were really overprescribing and not prescribing well. Now they're at risk for liability, so that tends to damper everything. Let's see. What programs does St. Michael have to address addiction issues in their community? Right now, I will have to say, not much. We do have, you can absolutely come and talk to me, and I will talk with your loved ones. I've helped with people dealing with addiction and helped people get into treatment. I can help you figure out the treatment. Try Googling, where should I send my person? Don't do that. Yeah, I mean, goodness gracious. I'll help you find good, solid recovery treatment programs if you need it. But this topic, we have these standing committees, and there's a Pastoral Care standing committee. My standing committee is very interested in alcoholism, addiction, and mental health issues, both for young adults and beyond. So this is something that we're working on in a strategic plan. How much? 1 minute? Okay. All right, which brings me to this last one then. This has to do with young adult, kind of the young adults going out. And they also are asking about, so the reason there's a drop in the 20s to 30s is they're just not going out and drinking. That's not the point as much anymore. Now, the big issue is there's a lot of loneliness going on because of the pandemic and whatever else. So creating connection at St. Michael or wherever for young adults is a big deal. And so that's what they're really struggling with now, is, okay, so we're not going to bars to meet people. Where do we meet people? That's a big issue, something that we need to be thinking about as a society. And then the last question was, there's certain, you may have heard of ad abuse or methadone or some others for opioid abuse. Yes, they can be helpful in getting people to go into recovery, but then you have to wean off of those. So essentially what you're doing is you're swapping one for another. Yes, they can be very helpful, but they're not going to be, like I said, there's not a pill solution to this. It's a combination effect, and you've got to deal with all of the issues that surround it from a mental health perspective, as well as the brain chemistry and the other issues. So, okay, that's all I have. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mother Robin, and thank you all for joining us for Pub Theology 2026. If you or a loved one can benefit from these talks that we've had over these past 4 weeks, please go to our YouTube channel SMAA Dallas, and all of our talks from Pub Theology will be there. The latest talk tonight will be uploaded by Wednesday, and we hope that you will avail yourself of that. If you are looking for a church home, a safe place that loves each other and loves their community, please visit stmichael.org and please find a service that will suit you. We would love to have you. Want to thank our hosts one more time, Vector Brewing. Please give it up. And please show your generosity for these fine folks. And we will see you next year. But for now, good night, and thank you so much for coming.